Be prepared. It's Tom Lear. You got to do something when you go bird watching.
Well, he was great. I mean, original, music and lyrics, and so funny.
And sarcastic as hell.
I mean, he left teaching math at Harvard just to do the whole song and
yeah, his
satire.
song's about Harvard. He's got a song about Harvard that's a great song.
About Harvard, I don't remember.
You know, he's poking fun at Harvard's reputation.
Okay,
but
so
I can't sing it.
We're gonna switch from Tom Lear. Are we in position? Are we good?
I mean, it's pretty wide, but I have two of them deep. Are you okay with the wide?
It looked kind of. I think it looked kind of cool. It's different.
Okay.
It's not typical.
Well, we want to hear again about first of all the sparrows. How many are in Arkansas? And
the sparrows.
Mladnov, you found a certain sparrow. Tell us. You told us the story.
Several.
Well, my version is that brewer sparrow. There's three sparrows that look similar that are always listed together in illustrations. The brewer sparrow is one of them. That one never occurred here until that day in 2011. At least it wasn't reported until then. Let's put it that way. And the other two occur here regularly. One of them is fairly rare, actually, called clay-colored sparrow, but it's seen pretty much every year, both spring and fall. And chipping sparrow is the third, and it's a common nesting bird, and now is becoming a wintering bird, actually. It's wintered at the University Farm the last 2 years in a row. But I mean, on our Christmas count, you look at our Christmas count data, there's several parties now that seem to report it. So, but at any rate, so in winter plumage they all look kind of similar, and the brewers and the clay colored are especially similar. But also the chipping and the clay colored are pretty similar. So so in the past I was trying to find clay colored sparrows, so I want to know. I keep checking the field marks after I look at sparrows to see whether it could be a clay colored or chipping. Well, in the discussion is usually brewers also, and in illustrations that discuss this group, they usually include all three, not just two. So what I thought I told Joe was. Well, I know the field marks because I keep reading about them when reading about the difference between clay-colored and chipping. I also read about brewers. So I happen to see brewers. Well, I already know the field marks.
And my version of that story is that Mike remembers stuff that most people don't. And my memory of this was, I was incredulous that he actually, the brewer sparrow is not, it doesn't have standout markings that really make it a dead ringer to
it looks a lot like a clay-colored sparrow, and some of them actually. There's different subspecies of brewers. There's two subspecies. One of the subspecies is almost impossible to tell apart. It's called a timberline sparrow. So, fortunately, that bird was not like that. And in fact, I don't think anybody who came to see it had problems, picking it out from other sparrows, from clay colored, for example.
Once they were told what it was.
Well, they knew what they were looking for, but
yeah.
I mean, it looked different.
What I just couldn't imagine, if you were in far western Oklahoma, where brewer sparrow actually nests, and you were a regular birder, you'd know it the way we know chipping sparrows here, things like that, because they're nesting birds. You see them, they nest here. But a bird that's pretty far away from where you typically see it, and is not a heavily marked bird, and it's a real small bird, that's what I was just stunned. But I'll say this, that I think that people that have known Mike for a long time, like I have, kind of expect that. It's just always shocking when he demonstrates it. I mean, that he's careful and remembers things. And so there are these subtle marks. I asked him that day when I came out and first saw that brewer sparrow after he found it, how he recognized it. Like, how did you know it was a brewer sparrow? Of all the things, I mean, it's not an ivory-bill woodpecker, you know. It doesn't have a big yellow bill. It's, you know, at any rate. So I just had remembered the story of that he remembered the page that they were on in a field guide, but maybe I just made that up when I got
Oh, I don't remember it.
But at any rate, that
I
he knew these
certainly can tell you
pictures,
now
that there
what
were these
pages.
lookalikes that are all, you know, and the field guides are set up like that. They're not set up phylogenetically where you have what the evolutionary relationships are. They tend to be set up in things that look alike within those relationships. So sparrows that sort of look alike tend to be grouped on pages so that you have these things you can look at. And so that's the reason I was kind of going, wow, and you remember that page. And so I gather, I now, after all these years, so that was 2011 when you found that bird. So
All
6
the
years
birds were
later, I now
2011.
know actually how this happened. Well, that's good.
People came from miles around to see.
They
this
came
bird?
from Little Rock at least, and
Well,
Charles Mills came from Texarkana.
It was the first time it was reported in the state, so people want to get it on their state bird list. So they come from all over the state. Mitchell Pruitt came from Jonesboro, and I don't know, Dick Baxter, did he come? I don't know.
I don't remember, but they came from all over. Like Mitchell was doing his big year as a high school student, and he
Yeah,
got
that's
his
right.
mother to drive him from Jonesboro to here because he didn't have a driver's license at that point. And I still remember them getting out of the car after that drive from Jonesboro. I was just shocked. And they went over there and immediately saw it. It was a great thing. I've got a picture of Mitchell, by the way, from that year. He just looked like a young kid then.
Oh yeah.
Now he looks like a totally grown man. But so it was a big thing. In the birders community, that was a big deal. And people came from all over for it.
That sparrow.
And
That's
I
right.
I for one was ready to start taking a collection and have a statue of Mike built out there on that flat where that bird, there was a flat. You know, the ponds at Chesney don't have, I mean at Woolsey don't have water in them like this most of the time. And it was all covered with grass and blackberries and things like that. And I thought we could put a statue of Mike right out there where that, he could be pointing at that brewer sparrow that so many people came to see. I'll bet there were 100 people that went out there to see that bird. At least.
100 people that come out to see the bird.
That didn't live in Fayetteville.
How many times have you guys been out here, and where are you? Describe where you are.
Right now. Well, we're in Centerton, Centerton, Arkansas.
The fish
Just-
hatchery?
Just south, you know, kind of, not the city limits I know extend farther south now, but south of where the main part of the town used to be. And yeah, this fish hatchery's been here since when? Since
World War II.
World War II, wow. So it's been here forever.
How often have you guys come out here?
Well, I came to Arkansas, you know, to Fayetteville in '83. That's when I started. Joe is about 5 years.
And I think
or
he
so.
started coming here the day after he moved here.
Before.
Oh, before.
Yeah, in July I came out here with Haggerty.
Well, there you go. I came out here with Doug James a few times in the late 1970s, but I think Mike's enthusiasm got me more, because he kept finding rare birds up here.
Well, a lot of shorebirds. I mean, I don't know. I found a lot of. I mean, they occur. You know, they've occurred many times since. You know, I haven't found anything that. You know, the ruff was probably the most rarest one, but he found a ruff not too far from here.
Yeah, but this place, there's something like 25 species of shorebirds you could see here in a year, like a really good year. You could see 20 or 25 probably.
And people have found.
We saw 16 or 18 one in a really big day. A wonderful big day. Oh gosh.
I mean, there have been birds like the ruff is seen very rarely, and snowy plover and Wilson's plover.
Redneck phalarope.
Well, red phalarope.
Red phalarope.
Yeah, redneck is seen. Redneck's seen almost every year. I used to write for the Arkansas Audubon Society newsletter, I used to write a summary, a digest. And redneck's seen almost every year, but red phalarope is not. It's seen very rarely. But all these birds have been seen at least a few times. Snowy plover and Wilson's plover have been seen less than 10. Red phalarope probably also less, maybe a little bit more than the other ones. But
Yeah, I could tell you a snowy plover story.
oh yeah, okay, go ahead.
Okay, we were having the Arkansas Audubon Society spring meeting in Fayetteville that year. And it was at the continuing educate, what used to be called continuing ed. I don't even know what they call it, Billy, but it's up on the square. And we were at that meeting standing around in a circle, and that was just when people first started using cell phones. And not many people had them. But somebody in that circle had a cell phone, and they answered it, and they said, somebody, was it you? Somebody had seen a snowy plover at Centerton. And they turned around, this was like in the late 1980s, and they turned around to me, I was standing there talking to them, and they said, well, somebody said they saw a snowy plover at Centerton. And I said, nope, that had to have been a semi-palmated plover. They're not going to see a snowy plover up there. And so, because they were all going to just drop everything and drive 30 miles up here to see a snowy plover. At that time, there'd only been one record ever in the history of the
state. That guy
state.
who used to be president, I forgot his name. Gosh, I can remember him.
Well,
he was not an ardent birder.
Wasn't it Ardenberg, like Barry Haas or somebody?
That's the guy. Barry Haas.
So we were standing there. Well, and I said nah, and I poo-pooed the whole thing about there being a snowy plover up here. And then the phone rang again, and it was one of the leading birders in Arkansas. Well, it's two of them, Kenny and LaDonna Nichols. They're both very good. And they were up there and they said, guess what we're looking at? We got the snowy plover. And at that point, the whole building cleared out. And everybody drove to Centerton to see it. And it was the second state record at that time. I think it was the second state record.
It was something like that. Yeah.
Needless to say, people had really wasted their time in asking me for advice about that, because I was just going with the odds, you know. Any rate, that stuff happens. But Centerton has had a lot of really, really good bird records over the years. And part of it's because it's public land. I mean, you got to think about this. There's 110 acres of state-owned land in here, and about half of it has ponds on it. But it's totally surrounded by all private land, where we don't really have access to look for shorebirds, and they don't have habitat for it either. So if we're going to see shorebirds that are migrating through the eastern Great Plains, where it kind of interdigitizes into western Arkansas, there aren't many places where you can see that. This is the best one, which is why we've always valued it. And the Game and Fish people have always been friendly and welcoming to our interest in birds here, even though the business of the hatchery is raising fish.
We've had
not
some
birds.
friction, but we got past it.
Yeah, we got past it. So, at any rate, it's been very good, and that's why you have things like that. I'm trying to remember the last big thrill bird, as I call them. I remember one last spring. You remember the breeding plumage common loon?
Yeah.
Did you see that?
Summer. We had
I mean, it was
in
at
the
a
summer.
it was in that pond over there.
One of the fish hatchery workers, the assistant superintendent.
Heath saw it. Heath Dake saw it.
Yeah.
And it's unusual. We see loons every year. It's not like we don't see loons. We do
But
see
not
loons.
in the summer.
But we don't see them in that summer plumage hardly ever, and we never see them close up. And that bird, everybody and their brother who wanted to take a picture of a loon in that beautiful checkered black and white plumage got to come here to the hatchery and take them.
But it was also at a very unusual time. It was in June.
Well, that's right. Yeah, so it was a bird that hadn't finished migrating. That's it. Or maybe it wasn't going to migrate this year.
Well, it didn't stay forever, but yeah, anything that occurs here, I mean, you can get close to it.
It stayed long enough for me to take a picture of it.
and loons, Yeah, I think, you know, there was a, I think, you know, Joe is, I think there's actually that year there were 2 sightings of loons. They may have been the same bird, but there was a loon on the spring bird count, I think, around that time.
Yeah.
And then there was this one in June, which presumably was a different bird. So, you know, but both were in breeding plumage, I think. So.
You guys bring a new meaning to loons. No? Yeah? No? I mean, how many are there?
I don't know. How many species?
Well, there are 4 or 5 species.
There's five species worldwide. 4, well, 5 in the United States actually too. But one of them is extremely rare in the United States. The Arctic loon is basically an old world bird. Occurs in Alaska sometimes or off the Pacific coast.
Okay, let's do some math here. How many times have you guys been here together?
Oh, I don't know.
Well,
over 100, I'm sure.
Yeah, a couple hundred at least together. I'd say a minimum of a couple hundred. I could dig through my field notes and actually figure it out. But most of the trips he's made, most of the trips I've made have been separately. I kind of come on, especially since I've retired, but even before I retired, I tend to do things spontaneously rather than in an organized way. So, like I'm sitting around the house and I say, wow, this looks like a nice day, I think I'll go to Centerton. Mike, on the other hand, considers the odds of when the best birds might be under the best weather conditions, and he tries to plan his trips around that.
Do you agree, Mike?
Do I agree with what?
What he just said, that you tend to plan your trips.
Well,
yeah, he's more organized.
Trips to where?
To here, I mean, you always...
Yeah, that's because, though, it's because I can't get up here very much. I can't just jump in my car and come.
But you have to realize this.
So I have to plan.
I don't know if Mike sees it that way, but he's produced these elegant charts.
Here comes some birds, Joe.
Based on real data, and it's a flock of killdeer.
About 20.
Yeah. He's produced these elegant charts that show the likelihood of seeing certain birds at certain times of the year. So if he's actually interested in something, he'll look at his data over the years to see where is the best time frame likely based on all these years of, like we're talking about 30 years of data here, over 30. And so they're called frequency charts, and he's got good predictive models. You guys looked at that, right?
Well,
you've seen this stuff.
I don't think I've sent it to
Well,
him.
you spent all those years with that, you know, figuring out those frequencies. So what he'll do is, okay, or at least my interpretation of it is that he looks at the frequencies. If he's, for instance, if he's just real interested in Baird sandpiper for some reason, or somebody's asked him about Baird sandpiper, they really want to see Baird sandpiper, and so, hey, look, it's a male and female.
Yeah.
Look at that. And so there'd be a likelihood
Turkey vultures.
of Baird sandpiper, and there's black vulture. There's a black vulture.
Oh,
look at that. Right
one
over.
black vulture in there.
How about that?
And 4 turkeys.
This is the best way.
At least 4. Maybe there's more actually. Look around.
At any rate, he'll look at the frequency
See, the black
data.
vulture is the one is the more squat one with the shorter wings. It's higher up also.
And he'll make a prediction based on that frequency, like this is the most likely time period to see them, and then look at the weather, because the weather affects the likelihood of seeing something as well. And so where those things cross, that's the day. And so if Mike has transportation, that's the day he'd be here. Me, if there wasn't anything good on TV and I had my dishes all done, I might just go to Centerton. And so sometimes you get lucky and it turns out good, but it's not as organized, and it's more spontaneous, you know. And since I retired, I've really got spontaneous.
Well, I would just say that I don't really look at the chart. Well, I mean, I don't consider it predictive, but you know, in that sense.
You really don't consider it predictive?
Well, no, but it tells me when the best time is, though, for a certain bird. I don't go usually just to see one bird.
Well, I look at them, if somebody asks me and they're interested in a particular bird, I look at your data and say, this is when he uses his greater yaw leg, so that's where we need to go. It doesn't mean that's when it'll be, because again, it's affected by weather and climate change affects it.
It gives you an indication of when the best time is.
Yeah, the chances are better at this time.
Yeah, of course it doesn't really, I mean, it doesn't tell you, just because I got, like 20% of the time, that's the past, right? It doesn't mean that the future is 20%, but you can compare like lesser yellow legs and greater yellow legs, and one's higher than the other one. It's probably true that the one that's higher in the past is going to be higher in the future.
And it's better than a wild-ass guess, which is what I would probably do.
Yeah.
And here's a blanket question. And we'll start with Mike and then we'll go to you, Joe. When you see a bird, what do you see?
I don't understand the question.
Do you see a number? Do you see a type of bird? What do you see? I mean, are you more interested?
I know
in
what he sees. I'll answer it for you. I'll answer it for him if he doesn't.
Well, I mean, I'm interested in how they're distributed, but I mean, what I see, of course, is a bird. Hopefully, I mean.
Do you count them, Mike, when they're flying over your head?
Do I count them?
Like the killdeer, that flock of killdeer?
Well, I try to count it. I got 15 or so. 50. So, I mean, that means there's at least 15 here, right?
Yeah. It's a minimum count.
Yeah.
So, Joe, what were you going to say, and can you say...
Speak for Mike?
Like, Mike sees...
Because Mike is...
Well, I tell you what I'm interested in. I'm not sure what you mean when you say, what do I see? Do you mean what am I interested in?
Yeah, do you see a bird? Do you appreciate the plumage maybe, or the color, or just the
sure.
fact of how novel it is?
Well,
or...
not the color, because he's colorblind.
Well, but I can see that that's red, that has, black letters, or are they green? You see that I can't. They're black, I guess, right?
That's where people are not.
See, I am red-green colorblind, but I can tell that John's jacket's green and that Nanette's is red. I mean that. So, I mean, in birds, it's similar. It depends really on the conditions, and how striking the difference is. But people are colorblind. Most of them see color, but they just don't see it as well, and they see it a little bit differently. I guess I can see green patches in the grass here and brown ones.
And what were you going to say, Joe, about?
Well, I was just going to say about Mike is that you have to remember that Mike's a mathematician.
Well, that's not really true, but
and that he.
I like math.
And that Mike likes math, and that he studied it for years, and he's able to apply all kinds of math knowledge to analyzing birds, bird distribution, bird frequencies, and things like that. So that I know for sure Mike appreciates individual birds just like anybody does, but he also carries home numbers that get turned into analysis.
But my philosophy on life in general is that numbers are important in understanding. Sometimes people talk about numbers, but it's just not presented quite in the right way. They don't notice. They don't see exactly what it means. I mean, that's true with me too. I don't know. It's easy to be fooled with statistics, say, for example. You talk about, the probability of something, and it's easy even to get the wrong probability or to use a more appropriate probability. Like you could say, if you want to predict how Fayetteville is going to vote, say, for something, not necessarily president. Say it's like something like the marijuana laws. We had two of them well, one was taken off the ballot, but the other one, I don't know if it would have passed or not, because it was a more liberal one. So, if you take a survey and you want to know how, well, Yeah, I don't know. My example is going to be too good, actually. But there's a difference between, say, how women in general vote versus how young women vote, and it does. If you know how women vote, it does tell you something about more than if you know how the overall population votes. It'll tell you one thing. If you know how women vote, it'll give you a more accurate picture of how, say, young women will vote. But of course, if you poll just young women, you'll get the most accurate results, of the three. So a lot of probabilities, they don't use quite the right statistics sometimes. My brother actually wrote a book, and he used an example of the O.J. Simpson trial, where Alan Dershowitz, one of O.J.'s lawyers, made the argument that that Nicole was probably not killed by O.J. because boyfriends, even if they abuse their girlfriends or wives, they don't usually kill them. But my brother's point was that that's really the wrong probability. That if you take just the women that are killed, and you find out, you calculate the percentage of those women that are killed by their boyfriends, who are abused by their boyfriends, that percentage is something like 80 or 90%. You see, so it gives you a completely different story. And so there's so many things in life that are just like that. There's so many numbers that, they're not quite presented. The most appropriate numbers aren't presented. So, that interests me. And I think, that everybody should try and understand them as well as possible, because they'll understand the world. And it's true with birds, but birds is just one thing, one little thing, usually, or a few little things sometimes.
So numbers rule. Numbers can rule.
Well, no, numbers are important. You can find things. It helps you figure things out. Usually, because like everything that humans do, it's not perfect. So we don't know the world perfectly. So we can just guess as to try and pick the most likely course of action that'll lead to a good result. So yeah, and the numbers help do that. So. Or can help. They can help mislead too. People who want to mislead people, of course, there's a lot of those. I'm looking for swallows.
Good.
Yeah, you've already seen.
I think it's a grackle. I think I heard it call.
You've already seen tree
Here,
swallows.
there's a grackle, common grackle.
Yay! Well, they were in my yard this morning.